last week's is the jumping off point for any one of these messages from here on out. And I think we need to remember, and I'm going to reiterate a couple things before we go into tonight, because some of this to some people may seem sort of what you'd call boring, okay? Some may not really like a lot of just the details that go into some of these things. But I believe it's important to understand what they were and why. We're going into the sacrifices and the Old Testament sacrifices. But if you remember from last week, what is the one major thing we learned about the sacrifices? What's the number one thing that we learned? God was sick of it. He never wanted it in the first place. He had no desire for it. He never desired it. It was never God's desire for animals to be killed and butchered in that manner. It was never His desire. Okay? If we don't start out with that premise and we don't realize that that's never been God's desire, we will go right into studying the sacrifices and we'll think, well, this is what God wanted, and this is what God wanted, and this is what God wanted. Okay? Here's the thing. Do I want my children to weep and cry over their sin? No, I don't want them to sin. Right. But if they do, then I want them to be sorry for it, okay? But at the very beginning, I don't want them to sin. And so these sacrifices are because of sin. It's a result of sin. And if we don't have that down, then we will think that it's always been God's desire for animals to be sacrificed for us, and that's never been. So tonight we're going to start, and sometimes I do things a little bit differently. I prayed about it. There's a lot of different sacrifices in the Old Testament. I'm going to start out in Leviticus chapter 7. Some people may disagree with the way I'm starting this one. Maybe it's not right. I'm going to look at it sort of like a recipe in a way. And that you have the title of your recipe. You know what you're going to make. But then you start going through the ingredients to find out. So this one we're going to talk about tonight is going to be called the heave offering. Okay? The heave offering. H-E-A-V-E. The heave offering. The heave offering is an ingredient, technically, or a part of a major offering called the peace offering. So the whole offering is called the peace offering, but a part of it is called the heave offering. So if you're writing things down, you can put heave offering, but this is not the whole offering. This is just part of the peace offering, okay? So I'm just dealing with one simple ingredient of a major one. So we're going to get into the heave offering. Next week, we'll get into the wave offering. And then after that, we'll go into the peace offering that covers both of those and then some, okay? So the whole offering here is the peace offering. We're dealing with one part of it, the heave offering, okay? Leviticus chapter 7, and we're going to do a lot of scriptures real quick, and we're going to just read verse after verse after verse that actually mentions the heave offering in them so that we have some clarity, okay? Leviticus chapter 7. Now, here we go. Leviticus chapter 7, verse number 11. Leviticus 7, verse 11. The Bible says, "And this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which he shall offer unto the Lord." Remember that word. It's a sacrifice offering, okay? So every one of these offerings, something is going to be given up and even die. It's a sacrifice. Now, this is a willful offering. I'm going to use a lot of words, okay? The peace offering is a willful offering. You give it of your own free will. It's not what we would call an obligation, mandatory. This has to be done. You have the choice, the free will to make this offering. So when you make it, it should also be done from the heart, because you're not made to do it. For instance, I can give you a simple illustration before we go on. There's a story in the New Testament of a couple named Ananias and Sapphira. You remember them? When they sold their house and they conspired together and they came to the man of God and said, they conspired to, we're going to keep some of the money over here. We're going to take some to the church and we're going to say, this is what we sold our house for and we want to give it all to God. And in the end, they were really keeping some back and they were lying, okay? And when they came to the man of God, what did the man of God tell them? While it was in your hand, didn't you have power over it? You did not have to bring it all to the church. It was not required. It was not a mandatory offering. But when you brought what you wanted to bring and lied and said, this is all we got, and when you lie about it, there's something wrong. You don't have to lie. You know what, Lord? I want to give this to you out of my own free will and my love for you. It's simple. It was not obligatory or mandatory for them to give it, but they gave it out of their own free will, but lied about it. That's where these free will offerings and these sacrifices, when God said, here's what you can do and here's how you can do it, if you don't do it, it's not a sin. Right. It wasn't mandatory or required. But if you do it, don't bring it to Him in your sin and lie about it in your pride and arrogance. I'm doing this to show everybody that I give more offerings than you. Wrong. I'm going to sacrifice more than you this year. Wrong. God didn't want sacrifices in the first place. But if you're going to, here's how He wants it done, He said. So, verse number 12, if ye offer it, this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, verse 11, which he shall offer unto the Lord. If he offer it for a thanksgiving, he shall offer it with a sacrifice of thanksgiving, unleavened cakes mingled with oil, and unleavened wafers anointed with oil, and cakes mingled with oil of fine flour fried. Besides the cakes, he shall offer for his offering leavened bread with the sacrifice of thanksgiving of his peace offerings. And of it he shall offer one out of the whole oblation for an heave offering unto the Lord. And it shall be the priest that sprinkleth the blood of the peace offering. Now, remember this very clearly because this is a major thing, okay? The major point of this heave offering, okay? A heave offering is a portion of the sacrifice. It's not the whole cow. It's not the whole lamb. It's a portion that is given. And pay attention to this phrase. It says this, verse 14, of it he shall offer one out of the whole oblation for an heave offering unto the Lord. Part of it, only one out of that whole thing, a portion of it, and it shall be the priests that sprinkleth the blood of the peace offerings. The portion that is taken out, part of the heave offering part, does not go in the burnt sacrifice. The portion that is called the heave offering is taken out of the sacrifice and it goes to the priest. Okay? Yes? Yes. So that's where we're going to get to the details of it in these scriptures. Yes. The priests actually do get this portion of the sacrifice. It is a specific portion set aside that God says, you don't have to give this offering. You don't have to give this sacrifice. But if you do, then a portion of it is called the heave offering. A portion of it is taken out and given to the priest himself for food. Okay? There's scriptural teaching, and this is where, and I've gone into a topic and study on tithes and offerings. And I went through that in the past, and we can go into it again. It's something that, honestly, any Baptist preacher does not like to deal with tithes and offerings because it, for some reason, is offensive to people. And then there's some Baptist preachers that they want to deal with it every week because they don't care about offending people. They just want more money coming in. You have the two. I'm one of those. I don't mind preaching the whole counsel of God. It doesn't bother me. but I don't want to harp on any one thing over and over and over and over and over. I do believe there's an obligatory tithing scripturally, and that offerings are free will. Okay? These ones are free will. So here we go. Later on in Leviticus chapter 7, verse number 29. So remember, in this peace offering, there's different offerings given at the same time. There's thanksgiving offering, the wave offering, heave offering. They're all part of this. But here we go, verse 29. Verse 28 says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, we need that clarity because this was God telling Moses, not Moses making up a story. Verse 29, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, he that offereth the sacrifice of his peace offering unto the Lord shall bring his oblation unto the Lord of the sacrifice of his peace offerings. His own hands shall bring the offerings of the Lord made by fire, the fat with the breast it shall he bring, that the breast may be waved for a wave offering before the Lord. And the priest shall burn the fat upon the altar, but the breast shall be Aaron's and his sons. And the right shoulder shall ye give unto the priest for an heave offering of the sacrifices of your peace offerings. He, among the sons of Aaron that offereth the blood of the peace offerings and the fat, shall have the right shoulder for his part. So, verse 34, for the wave breast and the heave shoulder have I taken of the children of Israel from off the sacrifices of their peace offerings, and have given them unto Aaron the priest and unto his sons by a statute forever from among the children of Israel. These are portions that are taken out, given to the priests and their families for meat. Yeah, do you have... So these are willful sacrifices. So it is not obligatory. So it's as they so choose and believe that God has laid on their heart to give this offering. Knowingly, so this is individuals, not whole camps. These are individuals bringing offerings because they believe they want to give an offering to God, a peace offering or whatever, what it is here. And the portion that the priest gets is called the heave offering or even the wave offering. They're two different parts. And he's specific in there of what part of the sacrifice is the wave offering and what part is the heave offering. And we're going to look at every one of these scriptures. Let's go to Exodus. Exodus chapter 29. And there's a lot of reading on the sacrifices. And we're gonna get through the reading on the sacrifices over the whole course of this. But right now, we're just dealing with the heave offering primarily. And verse number 25, Exodus 29:25. The Bible says, and thou shalt receive them of their hands, and burn them upon the altar for a burnt offering, for a sweet savor before the Lord. It is an offering made by fire unto the Lord. So we know that this is part of a burnt offering, okay? It's not just you bring an animal and they cut off parts and they do this and that and the other. This is part of a whole sacrifice to God. And then out of what is given to God, a portion of this is given over to the priests before the rest is completely burnt up. And it says, verse 26, and thou shalt take the breast of the ram of Aaron's consecration and wave it for a wave offering before the Lord, and it shall be thy part. So, just simply, what does wave mean? To wave something. It's real simple. They hold it up and they wave it before the Lord. It's part of the requirements that God said to do. And then the heave offering is not a back and forth motion, a waving, but it's a lifting up and down, an offering. It's to show in their symbolism which part is which. So the wave offering will be waved, so they know the part of meat that he has is literally the portion that God says is the wave offering. they would wave it before the Lord. The heave offering is the one that is lifted up and then brought back down. It's a heave offering, to lift up and down. The motions are different, showing which kind of offering was being given at that moment. And it says here, verse number 26, says that thou shalt take the breast of the ram of Aaron's consecration and wave it for a wave offering before the Lord, and it shall be thy part. And thou shalt sanctify the breast of the wave offering and the shoulder of the heave offering, which is waved and which is heaved up, of the ram of the consecration, even of that which is for Aaron, and of that which is for his sons. And it shall be Aaron's and his sons by a statute forever from the children of Israel, for it is an heave offering, and it shall be an heave offering from the children of Israel of the sacrifice of their peace offerings, even their heave offering unto the Lord. So this portion, there's not a lot of major exciting details that are going to come out in a message like this, okay? There's not a lot of really anything majorly, wow. It's simple. This is what God said. This is an offering God said you can give if you so choose, but if you do, this is how I want it done. Remember, God is specific in His details, and if God says, I'm going to allow you to do this, we need to make sure we're doing it how He wants us to do it. And this is how He says to do it. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 10. Leviticus chapter 10. So as we read all of these scriptures, now there's other scriptures that people actually will say, well, this was actually a heave offering, and this was a wave offering, and this was that and the other. If it does not say the word in there, I'm shying away from it right now. And I'm not trying to add anything in there. I'm trying to make sure that we use the scriptures that actually give specifics first before we get into anything supposedly deeper, because I don't believe the scriptures are really that deep if we compare scriptures with scriptures. But it's deep when we try to figure it out. I tell you what, it's amazing what people tell me they get out of the scriptures. Even yesterday, I had someone telling me some things about the scriptures, and I was standing there listening. I'm like, wow. Leviticus chapter 10, verse number 12. And Moses, Leviticus 10:12, and Moses spake unto Aaron and unto Eleazar and unto Ithamar his sons that were left. Take the meat offering that remaineth of the offerings of the Lord made by fire, and eat it without leaven beside the altar, for it is most holy. And ye shall eat it in the holy place, because it is thy due and thy sons' due of the sacrifices of the Lord made by fire, for so I am commanded. And the wave breast and the heave shoulder shall ye eat in a clean place, thou and thy sons and thy daughters with thee, for they be thy due and thy sons' due, which are given out of the sacrifices of peace offerings of the children of Israel. The heave shoulder and the wave breast shall they bring with the offerings made by fire of the fat, to wave it for a wave offering before the Lord, and it shall be thine and thy sons with thee by a statute forever, as the Lord hath commanded. So when you're studying this, it's not a major topic, and not something that we usually, I'm going to preach this because this is exciting. This is something simply that God said, when you give something as an offering to me, this is what He said. I'm going to make sure that the man of God himself is taken care of. That's what God is doing. He's simply saying, you give to me, and I'm going to give a portion of it to the man of God, to the priests, to the Levites, to those that are serving me at the time. But they don't get to do with it as they please. They don't get to sit around and collect it all. Let's just take it home and let's have a big old party for everybody. But doesn't He tell them they have to make sure it's in a clean place? Because why? This offering that you're partaking in is part of my offering, God says. This is part of something that was given to me. It's not for you to do with as you please. That's why I believe as preachers in the ministry, to live of your own, taking the money from the church and to live in your own pleasure is a very, very slippery slope just to go live in pleasure. I'm going to buy myself a $5 million mansion. And I've told you, I saw the pickup truck of a preacher who had 27 television screens in the cab of his truck because he was going to trick it out, or whatever they call it. You couldn't even watch some of them because they were down inside the door and you had to have the doors open. But he was going to fancy it out. Who needs 27 television screens? It was all for, it wasn't even to watch. It was for show. And he said, if God's not blessing you like He's blessing me, then you're living in sin and you need to get your life right with God. If you don't have a truck like mine, if you don't have a motorcycle like mine, woo! God says, you better observe this in a clean place. Amen. You better be careful with what you get. And I do not believe personally that a preacher or man of God should live an extravagant lifestyle in personal pleasure. Not that a preacher cannot have nice things to be used in the ministry for the cause of Christ and to properly take care of his family. But it's not about living a life of pleasure. It's not about that. And so that's why when you see these little things here and there, it shall be eaten in a clean place. Yes, ma'am. So these right here are the priests and the Levites, those that are actually serving in the temple or at the tabernacle at this very time. These were away from their homes. These were serving. They had different courses of service. And so those that were serving at the time, these offerings were for them as they lived of the temple and of the people and of the tabernacle. As they lived there and served their time, this offering was to support them while they were living there. Now, when they went home, they would go home and work in fields or gardens or whatever. They would do other things, just a general basic livelihood. But when they came there, this was a totally different lifestyle. They were literally stepping out of their homes, and their whole focus and dedication at this time was supposed to be on the... Yes. So now the sons and daughters did not have access to certain things in the temple and tabernacle. It wasn't just a free running place. And that's why one thing I believe that we ought to teach our children how to behave in the house of God. And I get after them when they act up, because just because I'm the preacher doesn't give my children the right to act as they please at the church. It does not give them that right. Many preachers believe it does. That's my kids and you don't mess with them. No, just because they're my children does not give them the right to act up. So there's a lot of principles that we can get out of this that it doesn't actually directly say, but there's some principles that we can learn. Hey, you know what? This is the house of God. And the preachers, when they do receive, they should be cautious and wise and should take care of it and handle it as if it were given to God, because that's what it was given for. It was given to God. And so he should handle it wisely. So we're going to get into that, but not tonight. I understand, right. And that's why we're going to go through these, and so that we do have clarity. And so here we have, let's go now to Numbers. Let's go to Numbers. Oh, I understand exactly what you're asking, because I personally have had to do a lot of reading through the scriptures. And then I actually looked up a couple of different commentaries, and they don't agree with each other. So I went back to reading, which is always how it is. I don't even know why I ever look at them much anymore, which I don't really look at them much. So, Numbers chapter 6. Numbers chapter 6. We're going to look at verse 17 to start out with. There's a lot of different offerings given. Sacrificial offerings. This one is part of the peace offering. This is the heave offering. Numbers chapter 6. Verse 17. And he shall offer the ram. Actually, it's a continuation of verse 16, so we'll just read verse 16 So you see a couple others. And the priest shall bring them before the Lord and shall offer his sin offering and his burnt offering. And he shall offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord with the basket of unleavened bread. The priest shall offer also his meat offering and his drink offering. How many offerings do we have there? There's a lot of them, aren't there? So that's why we're going to maintain a little bit of clarity in the scriptures. So he gives a peace offering. It says verse 18, and the Nazirite, so this is referring to a specific individual who has taken a vow to God, and the Nazirite shall shave the head of his separation at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall take the hair of the head of his separation and put it in the fire which is under the sacrifice of the peace offerings. And the priest shall take the sodden shoulder of the ram and one unleavened cake out of the basket and one unleavened wafer, and shall put them upon the hands of the Nazirite after the hair of his separation is shaven. And the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. This is holy for the priest with the waved breast and heave shoulder. And after that, the Nazirite may drink wine. This is the law of the Nazirite who hath vowed, and of his offering unto the Lord for his separation. Beside that, his hand shall get, according to the vow which he vowed, so he must do after the law of his separation. And so here is the appearance of a specific change in the offering. When a Nazirite who has made a vow to God, now listen carefully, this does not have to be a priest or a Levite. This could be any individual who has made a vow to God and lived separate and kept their vow. That when they actually give their offering unto God at the end, they also have come to sacrifice unto God, not for their sin, but an offering to God, thanking Him and showing Him their gratitude for what He's done. And they offer their offering. There's one slight change in here that you don't really see, is that the priest gives back to the Nazirite, the one who took the Nazirite vow, a portion of that sacrifice. But only because they have lived such a clean life and have fulfilled their vow, that they actually give them back a portion of it just in this moment. You hardly ever see an act like that. It usually goes, the offering, usually the priest's portion goes to the priest. But in this very instant, when you have a Nazirite, one who has lived clean and above reproach, they actually are handed back a portion of this very sacrifice. The priest shall take the sodden shoulder of the ram, and one unleavened cake out of the basket, and one unleavened wafer, and shall put them upon the hands of the Nazirite after the hair of his separation is shaven. This is one of the only times you ever see anybody getting a portion of that sacrifice that is not a priest, but it is one who has separated themselves. So you realize the strictness and the staunchness of this offering, that God actually does something very different and allows the individual to even receive back a portion of his own offering. Why? I believe God is showing a strict adherence to, this man has lived so holy and righteous and fulfilled it, that he is basically considered almost an equal with the priest in his lifestyle and mannerisms over this course of his separation. The heave offering goes to the priest. It goes to the priest. It goes to the priest. It goes to the priest. All of a sudden, wait a minute. Why is this guy who's not a priest, why does he get part of it? It's because of his lifestyle and his fulfilling of a vow to God. I'm going to get through, there's a lot more verses, so I'm going to go a little bit faster maybe to get to them. Numbers chapter 15. And of course, these are Old Testament. Remember, because God did away with the sacrifices. He never wanted them. He never desired them. And so you don't really see God ever pushing or talking about these sacrifices and really promoting them in the New Testament, because they should have been done away with. And these are, and if you remember correctly, last week we dealt with the offerings and the sacrifices that God said should not have happened after the Passover lamb. But now that they choose to live their lifestyle, God said, all right, I'm going to give, you want a sacrifice? I'm going to give you what you need to do and how you have to do it. Just like we mentioned this morning, that God had His laws and statutes and they're going to do it their way. And so He said, all right, I'll give you other laws and statutes. Go ahead, I'll give you more. But He doesn't say, I'll give you my laws and statutes. You guys want to sacrifice? You want to kill animals? You want to slay them on the altar for me? Then you better do it my way. I'm going to give you exact specifics on how you better do it, or else it's wrong. And it better be from the heart. Numbers chapter 15. Look at verse 19. Numbers 15, verse 19. Then it shall be that when you eat of the bread of the land, you shall offer up an heave offering unto the Lord. You shall offer up a cake of the first of your dough for an heave offering. As ye do the heave offering of the threshing floor, so shall ye heave it. Of the first of your dough ye shall give unto the Lord an heave offering in your generations. A heave offering. Now this is not just an animal sacrifice now. This is of the first fruits that you give a portion unto God. Now remember, the heave offerings do go, part of it goes to the priest. Look at Numbers chapter 18. Numbers chapter 18. This one has quite a few verses about it. Numbers 18 has quite a few verses. Numbers 18, verse number 8. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, Behold, I also have given thee the charge of mine heave offerings of all the hallowed things of the children of Israel. Unto thee have I given them by reason of the anointing, and to thy sons by an ordinance forever. This shall be thine of the most holy things. This is what you get out of it. You want more? You don't get more. This is what you get. You know what that means? That means, Mr. Priest, if God's people don't bring these offerings willingly, you don't get anything. That means you have to live by faith, Mr. Priest. That's what it means. These are not obligatory, mandatory offerings. So if God's people choose not to give them, then the priest just goes without. But what if they bring in abundance? Then he's obligated to deal with it properly according to the Scriptures. He has to live by faith. This shall be thine, verse 9, of the most holy things reserved from the fire. Every oblation of theirs, every meat offering of theirs, every sin offering of theirs, every trespass offering of theirs, which they shall render unto me, shall be most holy for thee and thy sons. In the most holy place shalt thou eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy unto thee. And this is thine, the heave offering of their gift. With all the wave offerings of the children of Israel, I have given them unto thee and to thy sons and to thy daughters with thee by a statute forever. Everyone that is what? Clean in thy house shall eat of it. This is where you have a little more clarity. The family eats of it, but they cannot just, it's not just an everyday, let's just sit down and eat a meal from whatever came in. God says you better make sure that you remember. You better be grateful and living a clean life, because this is still, remember, it's still part of God's offering. You don't just have the opportunity to live as you please of the offering. You better remember you need to make sure you're clean and be thankful. That's one of the reasons I believe we ought to pray and thank God and make sure our hearts and lives are right even before we eat. Lord, thank you for what you've given to me, realizing that everything that we have is from God. And this is thine, the heave offering. Look at same chapter. Look at verse number 19. All the heave offerings, verse 18, and the flesh of them shall be thine as the wave breast and as the right shoulder are thine. All the heave offerings of the holy things which the children of Israel offer unto the Lord have I given thee, and thy sons and thy daughters with thee by a statute forever. It is a covenant of salt forever before the Lord unto thee and to thy seed with thee. Now, if you read and read and read, and there's a lot of reading you could do. It wasn't, like I said, just meat. It wasn't just a burnt sacrifice. There were other things that they could include with it. The first fruits, the dough, things like that. And we'll see some other verses. But a portion of it would go to the priests to live off of during that time and to eat for their food. But the rest of it was a burnt offering unto the Lord himself. Down, same chapter, verse number 24. Verse number 24. But the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as an heave offering unto the Lord, I have given to the Levites to inherit. Therefore I have said unto them, among the children of Israel they shall have no inheritance. They don't get a land of their own. They don't get a nation of their own. They live off of the giving of God's people. They live off of the giving of the children of Israel. The priests, the Levites, the men of God are to be living off of the giving of God's people. And so that's called living by faith. Because if God's people don't give, they've got to trust God. When the God's people do give, they live off of that for their needs and necessities, take care of their family. But it's not for personal pleasure because it's still given for God and to God. Verse number 26, or verse 25. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Thus speak unto the Levites, and say unto them, When ye take of the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them for your inheritance, then, pay attention, ye shall offer up an heave offering of it for the Lord, even the 10th part of the tithe, and this, your heave offering, shall be reckoned unto you as though it were the corn of the threshing floor, and as the fullness of the winepress. Thus ye also shall offer an heave offering unto the Lord of all your tithes, which ye receive of the children of Israel. Preacher man, you still have to give to God too. So when it comes to you, and the church gives to you, and God's people give to you, you owe a tithe to God too. You're not above the law, preacher. You're not above the law. You owe it too. If it's given to you, you give the tithe too. This heave offering shall be reckoned unto you. Thus, verse 28, ye also shall offer an heave offering unto the Lord of all your tithes which ye receive of the children of Israel, and ye shall give thereof the Lord's heave offering to Aaron the priest. Out of all your gifts ye shall offer every heave offering of the Lord, of all the best thereof, even the hallowed part thereof, out of it. So whatever you get, preacher, you give the best of yours. And you make sure you are giving too. So, verse 30, therefore thou shalt say unto them, when ye have heaved the best thereof from it, then it shall be counted unto the Levites as the increase of the threshing floor, and as the increase of the winepress. And ye shall eat it in every place, ye and your households, for it is your reward for your service in the tabernacle of the congregation. And ye shall bear no sin by reason of it, when ye have heaved from the best of it. Neither shall ye pollute the holy things of the children of Israel, lest ye die. A few more verses here. Look at Numbers chapter 31. Numbers chapter 31. When somebody gives of theirs to God, God said, I'm not going to count it as sin to the priests if they have their portion of it. It's not something that anybody can just do as they please with it. This is how it needs to be done, God said, if you're going to do it. And priests, you don't get to do with it as you please either. I'm not going to hold it against you for... What God is saying is, I'm not going to hold it against you for taking part of my offering. As long as you do it my way, this is how it's got to be. Numbers chapter 31. Look at verse number... look at verse number 25. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, take the sum of the prey that was taken. This is when they go and they go at a war and they're cleaning up after the war. Take the sum of the prey that was taken, both of man and of beast, thou and Eleazar the priest, and the chief fathers of the congregation, and divide the prey into 2 parts, between them that took the war upon them, who went out to battle, and between all the congregation. And levy a tribute unto the Lord of the men of war which went out to battle, 1 soul of 500, both of the persons and of the beeves and of the asses and of the sheep. Take it of their half and give it unto Eleazar the priest for an heave offering of the Lord. The children of Israel half. Thou shalt take 1 portion of 50 of the persons of the beeves, of the asses, and of the flocks, of all manner of beasts, and give them unto the Levites, which keep the charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. He said, when you go to war and you take the spoils of war and you bring it back, he said, I want you to take one part out of 50 of that and offer it as a heave offering unto the Lord, and it goes to the priests. The priest didn't go out and fight the battles. He said, this is what you do. You take care of the men of God. You take care of those that are serving in the tabernacle. They don't get their own inheritance like everybody else. God had it set up so the children of Israel took care of the men of God. Later on in that same chapter, it gives you the direction of it. Verse number 41. And Moses gave the tribute, which was the Lord's heave offering, unto Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. The offering was to the Lord, and the Lord used it to take care of the men of God. Look at Deuteronomy, and we're going to have, this will be the last passage that we go to, Deuteronomy chapter 12. So the heave offering, according to the scriptures, is part of a peace offering. It's included with the peace offering. You have a wave offering. You have Thanksgiving offering includes in there. The heave offering is a specific part of an offering that is given to maintain the men of God, to take care of them and their families, to help support them and take care of them, so that they didn't have to go out to war, so that they didn't have to go and try to maintain their own country. They dwelt among the people, and the children of Israel would take care of them. Where are these offerings made at? Well, let's read this and then we'll get into that. Deuteronomy chapter 12. Verse number 5. But unto the place, okay, but unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither shalt thou come. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, and your tithes and heave offerings of your hand, and your vows, and your freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks. And there ye shall eat before the Lord your God, and ye shall rejoice in all that ye put your hand unto, ye and your households, wherein the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes. For ye are not as yet come to the rest and to the inheritance which the Lord your God giveth you. So at this moment, he's telling them, you need to bring everything. You have not yet reached the place where God has given you. So at this moment, bring it all. Verse 10, but when you go over Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, here it is, then there shall be what? A place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. What's the next phrase? This is the answer to your question. So, thither shall you bring all that I command you. God said, wherever I tell you to do it, that's where you do it. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and the heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye and your sons and your daughters, and your men servants and your maid servants, and the Levite that is within your gates, for as much as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to thyself, that thou offer not thy burnt offerings. Where? In every place that thou seest. You don't get to do it wherever you choose. You get to do it wherever I tell you to. Oh, we're not in the same chapter? We're getting there. Verse 14, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes, there thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there thou shalt do all that I command thee. Notwithstanding, thou mayest kill and eat flesh in all thy gates, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. You can kill and eat any animal that you want, wherever you want. According to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee, the unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as of the roebuck and as of the hart. Only ye shall not eat the blood, ye shall pour it upon the earth as water. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates the tithe of thy corn, or of thy wine, or of thy oil, or of the firstling of thy herds, or of thy flocks, nor any of the vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offerings, or heave offering of thy hand. You can't take it home and eat it at home. You don't just travel around and eat wherever you want of the offerings. You can eat any animal you kill. Go ahead and eat it. Kill it and eat it. But not the ones that are offered as an offering. Those are not just yours to kill and eat. If you offer it as an offering, Your hands are off of it. But thou must eat them before the Lord thy God in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, thou and thy son and thy daughter and thy manservant and thy maidservant and the Levite that is within thy gates, and thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God in all that thou puttest thine hands unto. Take heed to thyself that thou forsake not the Levite as long as thou livest upon the earth. He's saying, don't forget to take care of the man of God. When the Lord thy God shall enlarge thy border as he hath promised thee, and thou shalt say, I will eat flesh, because thy soul longeth to eat flesh, thou mayest eat flesh, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. If the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of thy herd and of thy flock which the Lord hath given thee, as I have commanded thee, and thou shalt eat in thy gates whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. And he tells them, go ahead and eat what you want. But if you're too far away from where I tell you, if you're too far away from where I tell you to offer your sacrifice, kill an animal and eat it. But, verse number 25, verse 25 is talking about the blood. Verse number 26, only thy holy things which thou hast and thy vows thou shalt take and go into the place which the Lord shall choose. So when you're ready to give your tithes and offerings, when you're ready, I'm just too far from the house of God and I just don't have a church that I can attend and I just don't. God says, no. You know what's funny? It's not even funny. There's a lot of churches right now that have stores, cafes, coffee shops, bookstores, and this is what they say. You buy a book, it goes to missions. You buy anything out of our vending machines, it goes into the offering. I know people personally that said, hey, if I'm going to give to God because He wants you to, I'm going to get something out of it. So I never give any money in the offerings. I just go buy stuff out of the cafeteria or I go buy stuff out of the bookstore. I'm giving to God and He's getting what He wants and I'm getting something out of it too. You have your reward. God said, when you're going to eat whatever you want. But if it's mine, you better bring it to me. And so what they do when they have their sacrifice is they wait till they can actually travel to wherever it is. If you're too far away, don't kill the sacrifice. You have no right to it. If you live too far away, then you better wait till you have a time to be able to get there, and then you better gather it all up and take it all at the same time. You better make sure you bring it to me, because this is how I take care of my men. That's what He says. That's God's way. He was very specific of the holy things. You don't just mess with it. You have it set aside and you bring it. And it's not your choice. And well, this is my offering unto God and I just too far. So God said, if you're going to offer it to me, then you better bring it to me. This lamb, remember this. We're going to be done. It's a willful offering. You raise this lamb. It's unspotted. It's unblemished. You raise this lamb. It's unspotted. It's unblemished. It's the perfect sacrifice. But you're like, you know what? We're going to cook and eat that one today. We're going to kill and eat that one today. God says, go right ahead. It's yours. You can do as you please. But all of a sudden you raise the one, you're like, God, I want to offer this one to you. And He says, you better not just kill and eat it then. You better bring it to me. You better bring it to me. It's your choice. You have the choice to do whatever you want with that lamb. But when you make that choice that it's yours, that you're going to give it to me, when you make that choice, then you better bring it to me. You better bring it to me. Amen. And that's what He says. So the heave offering was God's simple way of helping take care of the priests. And as the priests lived among the people, and in their courses, they would serve in the tabernacle and in the temple. And they would receive a portion of the tithes and the offerings to sustain them. Here's the question. And I want you, some of you already know the answer. There were 11 other tribes. And whatever their portion was in life, in war and everything else, they gave a tithe to God. They gave the heave offerings to God. What did the Levites have to give to God? The whole tribe belonged to God. Amen. And God said, out of all the tribes, that whole tribe is mine. The Levites, you literally raise your child dedicated to God from birth. That child doesn't have a right to go out and live like everybody else and work like everybody else and serve in the armed forces like everybody else. God literally says, I'm taking that tribe and that whole tribe is my tithe. That's what God said. I'm not going to take a man out of this family and a man out of this family and a man out of this family, which would have been the biblical tithing way. Technically, the firstborn of your children you raise for God's honor and glory. And God said, I'm just going to do it very simply. I'm taking the whole tribe of Levi. That whole tribe is mine. Amen. You don't have a right to raise your children any way you choose because your family is mine to serve in the temple forever. Right. Until He does away with it, until Jesus Christ comes and sacrifices are done. So when the others are out working, when the others are out serving, I just read a book yesterday and I just looked through it. A man who was talking about serving God, and he wrote an entire book on how to fundraise for the ministry because his wife told him, we're tired. He said, we were tired of living on 60% of our budget. And his wife told him, are you going to take care of this family or not? If you're living on 60% of your budget and somehow you're still living, then I would say somehow God's taking care of you. Leave it alone. Well, my budget, I need more money. Well, if you're living on it and you're doing okay. And his wife said this, are you going to take care of this family or not? So he said he sat down and wrote up a program, and now he's got a nice book on how to fundraise and how to get people to give money to support. And he's like, he tells in detail how you can fundraise for God. God's way was not a fundraising way. It was a way of faith, living by faith, trusting God. Simply, the heave offering, a simple way of the priest living by faith. If God's people gave, that's what they lived off of. And if they didn't give, that's what they lived off of. Very simple. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I know this wasn't really probably one of the most enthusiastic, exciting messages, but it is in the Scriptures. And there's a reason you put it in there. The teachings and the biblical principles that are applied in every one of these gives us examples of how you work and your way of doing things to show that you're almighty, that you're all wise, all knowing, and you have a reason for why you do what you do. Lord, I pray that as we study the Scriptures, may we learn to understand that you are God and that you have a way of taking care of the physical needs of those that are even in the spiritual ministry. And Lord, that those that are in a spiritual ministry ought to be living by faith